Okay, welcome back. I hope you found those videos helpful. I know I did, and again, that second video is just impressive to me, the number of techniques that the physician uses and how well she does and how really comfortable it seems, even though it's very strategic and very intentional. So a few kind of main points about motivational interviewing. It is a stance, it's a kind of an approach to a conversation, and it's a set of techniques. It helps allies to initiate behavior change, so they're the ones doing it, they're the ones initiating it by resolving their own ambivalence, right? When they have different, they have reasons to want both things. So some examples, some places that it works really well, and why we're talking about it in the context of the Family Advocate program, is unhealthy behaviors and difficult decisions. And probably you'll have no shortage of those in your specific case to address. So it's a great strategy to use to address some of these. All right, so some strategies, some specific strategies are expressing empathy, as we've talked about before, developing that discrepancy. So we say developing because there is a discrepancy, right? We'll notice that, like, okay, so you love your kid and you want your kid back, and you're addicted to heroin or whatever it is, right? That's a discrepancy. So that's pretty clear to us, and it's pretty clear to them too, I think. So how can we develop it, take it further, get more into the weeds, look at all the reasons and the reasons for and against, and help them come to a point where they've been confronted enough with this discrepancy that they're willing to resolve it. Because if we're not, then we can just go, yeah, that's a hard thing, and just sort of avoid it. So developing allows us to sit in that in a supportive way, and then hopefully lead to that change. We do want to avoid argumentation and roll with the resistance. So we are going to encounter some of that resistance in these conversations where they're like, yeah, but I really like this, and it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, right? The kind of resistance that you heard from that bio mom, or from that mom in the video that you just watched before this. Notice how the physician was really unflappable in that. So she'd be trying to go forward and hit this dead end, and then kind of, okay, let's try this, and then hit this dead end, and then, okay, let's try this, and then right, and just keep going. And as we roll with that resistance and try to find other ways forward, we can find progress that way. And we're going to always do this in a way that supports their self-efficacy. So it's not us rescuing, it's not us saying this is how you have to do it, but really what do you want to do at your deepest level, and how can we help you to do that? How can I come alongside you? How can I support you? That kind of stuff. All right, so let's talk about reflective listening. This is a fairly basic concept, but there's a lot of nuance to doing it well. So we want to listen carefully and reflect what our ally says back to him or her. We want to keep the focus on the other person and emphasize positive statements. This can do a lot to diffuse resistance and help them to feel heard and supported. So it sounds like this, right? I get the sense that, are you saying this, right? On the other hand, on the one hand this, on the other hand this. That can be a great way to kind of highlight that discrepancy that we talked about, to develop that, to kind of restate it, help them see that they're being heard. And we can also do that in a way that, if we've got it right on, they'll feel validated, they'll feel heard, and it can also kind of clarify things for them. If we're off, they'll correct us, generally speaking, especially if we've created that kind of open environment where they can do that and it's not going to hurt our relationship. And that's a good thing. That can bring clarity and progress to the conversation. So some ways to use reflective listening. There are several strategies here. One is just repeating. Again, this is one of those that to me feels pretty basic, and it's hard for me to do this in a way that feels natural. So if they say, I'm feeling sad, I can just reflect that back, probably not right away, but later in the conversation, I said, you mentioned you were feeling sad, right? Then you can paraphrase, you can say it another way, and this can be a way that it feels less forced. They say they're feeling sad, you say, you've been down lately, right? Another way is deducing, and this takes it a little bit further. Sounds like you said that right after you mentioned losing your job. it sounds like losing your job has maybe been a factor in this, right? So you can kind of make some connections for them. And then you can also deepen it. You can go even further and do some more interpretation. It seems like recent events have really hit you, making you feel uncertain about your future, right? Maybe they never mentioned their future, but this is a thing we can kind of try on, like, does this fit? Is this what you're saying? That can help them to come to really have insight, which can be empowering for them to be able to move forward. We also want to work on consciousness raising. How can we elevate their consciousness about the situation? So there can be different activities we can do with this. So when you see a situation where, man, it feels like you're just not making much progress, it's pretty apparent to you that there's a problem here, but they don't seem to see it as a problem. We can do different activities to kind of help them to see. And maybe we realize, oh, actually, I guess maybe it's not that big of a problem. Like, maybe it's not as much of a problem as I thought it was. But then at least we know. So think critically about what are some ways we can do that. So if there's an eating issue, right, like keeping a food diary, just to be aware, okay, how much do you eat, or what do you eat? And is that, how normal is that? How does that align with your goals? That kind of stuff. Or making a list of pros and cons about a potential decision or outcome. Exercises that encourage them to take other people's perspectives. Okay, so you've talked about how you see it from your perspective. Let's talk about how the caseworker sees this kind of situation. If you were the caseworker, what do you think you would do? Right, that kind of stuff. These can be really helpful to develop their understanding and sometimes to address that cognitive dissonance we talked about before. All right, summaries is another strategy that can be really helpful. This is longer than just a reflection like we did earlier, and it can link multiple ideas together. It can be really helpful when we're transitioning to a new topic. Okay, so we've talked about this and this and this. Let's transition now to this other thing. It can be used to show both sides of ambivalence, and it can also be used to end the session. And I really like to kind of end our interactions that way with family advocates, where, man, okay, so we've talked about a lot today. You guys have been doing a really great job with this, and you talked about how for the next week you want to do this, and you want to do this, and I'm going to look into this other resource for you, and I'll get back to you on Tuesday. Right, make sure that everybody's on the same page, that they felt heard, all of that kind of stuff. All right, a few other techniques. This is a cool one, asking permission to talk about a certain topic. This is a really powerful technique, especially when it's going to be something that's difficult to talk about, especially when it's that truth that you're not sure they're going to receive well, right? So, it can be like, so you've shared with me your perspective on this. Are you open to hearing a suggestion? Are you open to hearing an idea about maybe a better way to handle it? Right, that kind of stuff. Are you open to that? Is it okay if I ask a question about this kind of thing? Right, that kind of thing. It does a couple things. Number one, hopefully, and they may not have the level of self-awareness or self-agency to say no, but sometimes the answer is no, and they'll say no. And that's great. That's a great example of honesty and go like, okay, I respect that. Let me know if that changes, right? Or do you want to talk about it at a later time, or is that just off the table? That can be a healthy conversation to kind of navigate what is this relationship going to look like, and what's maybe off limits, at least right now. A lot of times it's going to be temporary, but usually I think people will say yes. But asking the question and that process, that time from asking the question to yes, allows them to kind of, okay, I'm about to hear something hard that I may not like, but I'm agreeing to this. I'm saying I want it, and that little space can be enough to help them handle it much better than they otherwise would. So it's a powerful strategy, and really communicates a respect for their boundaries, their identity, where they're at emotionally, all that kind of stuff. We also want to support self-efficacy in a couple of ways. We want to help allies to verbally acknowledge changes that they have made. So that can be a great strategy to help them to speak truth to themselves, help them to encourage themselves. A lot of people have negative self-talk, right? but this strategy allows them to have positive self-talk and to be kind of encouraged into doing that while somebody else who supports them is there. And then we can kind of celebrate that together, right? That's awesome. You have made that change. And that's so cool. And it can also put stuff on your radar that maybe you didn't have before, which in turn increases their self-confidence in their own ability to change, helps them to be in that positive mindset and to build on that. I think it can also be helpful to ask, how have you been able to make that change? To get specific about, like, what led you to that place? Why is that different? Because you struggled to do that before, but you just did it and made it look easy. Like, what was different? That can be a really great way to capitalize on the learning and progress that you're making. All right, a few other strategies here. One is eliciting change talk, inviting that positive change talk in your relationship in the family advocate context. One is just having allies give reasons for change. So you talk about this change that you want to make. I wonder if you would elaborate on why that is, why you feel the need to do that. So that could be particularly appropriate if they're saying they want to make a change, but they don't seem totally sold out on it. If you're sensing some ambivalence that maybe they're not admitting, having them just talk about some reasons for it, or even asking them about the negative parts about it, can help to kind of get all that out in the open, develop that a little bit, and give them more energy, more motivation to commit to the change and actually follow through. But yeah, having them give the reasons can solidify all of that too. How could a positive change benefit you? What will happen if you don't change, right? These are just different kinds of approaches you could use to approach the reasons for a change. The therapeutic paradox on the right side of the screen there, that's a really interesting concept. And this is helpful when an ally isn't making progress, even in that exploratory conversation where it seems like you're not getting anywhere. And you saw this probably you may have noticed this in the second motivational interviewing video that we did right before this, where you had the physician and the mom trying to quit smoking. She gave her, she kind of teed her up for this, and the lady, the mom didn't take her up on it, but she basically was trying to, like, yeah, maybe now isn't isn't the right time, or like it seems like it's not that big of a deal, right? Like that kind of thing, right? So she's doing it in a way that's not patronizing, but that is saying, like, it's kind of accentuating the negatives of the ambivalence. Not much. It's a difficult balance to strike, but it is saying, okay, yeah, like maybe now it's just not the right time. There's other stuff that you need to do, right? And then they can go, no, like a lot of times we're so contrary as people. A lot of times our natural response to that kind of thing is, no, I think I do need to make this change now. So in a way, it kind of gives them an out. And a lot of times they won't take it because they know deep down that it is a change that they need to make. And getting them to argue for the change can help establish some positive momentum and to resolve some of the ambivalence. A few other strategies. One is scaling questions. You saw this in the video as well. On a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is this and 10 is this, what number best reflects how confident you are you can make this change, right? That was the question that she gave in the video before this. But it could be a lot of different things. It's a way to establish where they are, but also to kind of probe a little bit how they can move one way or the other. What would it generally better, right? That's where we want them to move. So what do you think it would take for you to move just 1 point higher on the scale? What would that look like? Yeah, why, and even just asking them, why did you rate yourself there? But really focusing on what does it take to move up? Or what was different when you rated yourself higher before? That kind of stuff. And then this idea of decisional balancing. This is really pretty similar to the pros and cons that we talked out before. But when we're dealing with two choices, we can look at the pros and cons of both, right? The good of not changing, the bad of not changing, the good of changing, the bad of changing, right? And then kind of being able to weigh all of that. And that can help, again, just develop that and bring clarity with all this. All right. So once your ally has decided to pursue a potentially healthy and effective solution, we want to support that, right? We want to get practical. Again, this goes back to that planning stage, because again, if we're not really helping with the planning, if we don't have good planning, there's a 50% chance that they're going to relapse. And again, with our population, probably even higher than that. So we really want to get practical. Okay, well, you want to do this? I don't know, but let's figure it out together. So what are the next steps? What do we need to learn? What are the questions we need answered? And then we can pursue those together. What steps should we take? Also looking forward to that celebration and then coming through on it when the progress is made. Hey, I'm really excited to celebrate your progress next week or whatever. What potential barriers do you think might come up, and how can we preempt those? How can we address those before we get there? That can help level set expectations, because sometimes when we have a great idea in mind and we want to do something positive, we have this naive belief that everything's going to go smoothly for us because I'm doing the right thing, right? But the reality is often just that that's not the case. A lot of times there are barriers that get in the way. There are obstacles that can make us disillusioned if we're not anticipating them. So we can help anticipate realistic barriers that could come up, and also just sort of have that conversation. Okay, so you're doing the right thing and you're doing a hard thing. So what can we do to make sure that you don't get disillusioned when you run into barriers? What are some barriers you might accept or you might confront? And how can we make sure that you don't get thrown off when you run into roadblocks? And then one other thing to think about is this is an option for you. The family advocate role is an hour per week. That's what we're asking for volunteers, that you would commit to an hour per week for 6 months. But you may get into a situation where this person's going to go to their first court appearance, where your ally's going to go to their first court appearance, and they feel really alone. And you don't have to, there's no pressure on this, but you could decide, I'd like to, can I go? Can I just sit? Would that help? Right? If you would like to do that, or if they need to check into rehab, but they're worried about being able to commit, would it be helpful if I just met you there and walked you in the door, just walked into the door with you and kind of to figure out the check-in process together, that kind of stuff. Again, there is no pressure on that. That could be your week's meeting. So if you want to make that the time for the week, you could find ways to do that. But if you want to do some of those extra steps just to support your ally, you certainly have that option. When it's possible, when it's appropriate, that's certainly your prerogative to do something like that. You could do that to support your ally. All right, so a few other places to go for support. The child's caseworker is one of the best points of contact for getting resources to bio parents. A lot of times they don't know what they need. A lot of times that relationship is strained, but you can encourage the bio parents to go through them, to try that avenue. Part of that is that they have a lot of funds that they can use for the bio parent. They have a lot that they're supposed to do in terms of showing that they're supporting reunification, showing they're supporting the bio parents. So if the bio parents need something, especially if they can self-advocate for it from the caseworkers, a lot of times they can get the best resources from the caseworker. So that's a lot of times a great place to start. There are also other organizations around here like Serve 6-8 who offers direct services to support motivated individuals to find a job, improve money management skills, and more. They have a lot of resources. So, we can get them set up with an appointment with them and all that. Also, your family advocate supervisor can help if you get stuck. Right now, as we're starting the program, your supervisor is just going to be me. But hopefully, as we scale this up, we may get to a point where we're big enough that there's kind of an intermediary supervisory structure where different people report to different supervisors, and there's kind of more of a chain, because hopefully we get enough family advocates that I can't possibly manage all of them. So we'll see. Whoever your supervisor is, though, that's a great person to ask questions, and we will work our hardest to find those answers and find the resources that you need. One of the most powerful things that you can do, though, is as you guys have established direction, as you've gotten committed decisions from your bio parents, from the allies, that we follow up on those goals as they're pursued to provide positive accountability and encouragement along the way. And we don't want to forget to celebrate even those small successes, because we just are often not good about that in our lives. But especially when we're struggling, like, we need to know it's a big deal that we came through on something positive, that we were the person that we wanted to be. And our society can so often focus on the negatives, the deficits, the weaknesses, the fears, the insecurities, the pathologizing, that we forget to celebrate those moments of beauty, those moments of victory. So we want to do that well in this program, and encourage you to really take point on that in your relationship with your ally. Okay, we just have a few final points here. One is crisis intervention. What to do if you're worried that somebody you know or work with may hurt themselves or somebody else. And this is really specifically in the family advocate role. If your ally, if you're concerned that they're going to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, what do we do there? We're hoping this never happens, but it is something that could possibly come up. One common myth, particularly when it comes to suicidality, is that we shouldn't ask people if they're considering hurting themselves or others. A lot of people are afraid, I can't broach that conversation, it's going to be too awkward, too uncomfortable. Or the biggest fear, the most maybe legitimate fear that people struggle with is, what if that like gives them the idea or somehow like pushes them over the edge? But that is a myth. The truth is, it's always better to ask. Nobody's going to just commit suicide because you asked them if they were going to. If anything, it demonstrates a level of courage and consideration that you would ask. It demonstrates a level of concern about them as a person. So if they're considering it, that question can be a way to show empathy and care for them. But if they're not considering it, they're not going to be like, you know what, never thought about that, I think I might try. That's not going to happen. So the worst that can happen in that situation, in terms of like feeling awkward or missing the mark with that question, is that we ask the question and they go, oh, nope, that's not a thing. Don't have to worry about that with me. But if we ask the question and they say yes, like, hopefully they'll be honest. Like, hopefully if that's the reality, they'll be honest and share that with us, and then we'll talk about in a minute what we'll do in that kind of situation. But worst, like, if they are not honest, then at least they know we care. At least we've expressed that concern, and we've kind of done everything we can do about that. But if they say yes, if they say that they have been considering suicide or hurting themselves or somebody else, we want to access emergency services right away. We want to make sure that we're not leaving them alone, that we're not, that they're never in a situation where they could act on that, and we had the potential to prevent it and didn't. So we want to help people access services. There's a National Suicide Prevention Hotline number on the screen here. You could call that. There are trained professionals there to help. You could call 911. Like, if you're in an emergency situation with your ally, any kind of emergency, they're a threat to themselves or others or some other kind of emergency, like, when in doubt, call 911. If you're not sure, call 911. Make sure that you get the help that you need. You don't have to worry about, like, you don't need to check in with your supervisor first or anything like that. Like, take care of them and make sure that emergency is resolved. And you can help them find professional counseling, again, especially if it's not really an emergency right now, but there is something that needs to be addressed. There are lots of resources for that. A lot of times they already qualify for free counseling, or the department can help with that. All right, this is the final slide, the final section of the Family Advocate video training. So kudos to making it this far. Let's talk real quickly about testifying in court, and then we'll wrap it up. It is possible that you will be asked to testify in court or even subpoenaed. It is not likely, but it could happen. So we want to talk about what will happen if you are, just kind of some guidelines there. But first I want to explain why I don't think it's very likely that it'll happen. One of the big reasons is we're going to be involved in the first 6 months of a case. and there's not going to be a court decision until 12 months out at the earliest, generally. So it's unlikely that we'd be subpoenaed for that because there's a 6-month gap there. There's a lot that's happened in that last 6 months, and so much, at least in our court experience, so much of it deals in what's true now, what's most recent, right? Recent stuff in the case. So 6 months ago, you had this relationship with this person, not really relevant right now. So I think it's unlikely that you'd be asked to testify or subpoenaed. But if you are, first of all, tell your family advocate supervisor so they can support you. Also, I would encourage you, probably if that happens, you're going to be subpoenaed by your parent ally's attorney. And that person should prepare you, make sure you're feeling comfortable, that you have your questions answered, that kind of stuff. If you're not satisfied with that preparation, please let your supervisor know, your family advocate supervisor know, and we want to do what we can to support you in that. So we can partner you up with another attorney to get your questions answered. We can make sure that you're feeling good about it. Ultimately, we want to make sure that you are not in any way, not any more uncomfortable or anything than you need to be in that situation. Your goal in that role is to be honest, but to be careful about the ways that your responses might be twisted to misrepresent the truth. There are some attorneys, I don't know, maybe a lot of attorneys are this way, but there are certainly some who are very skilled at twisting the truth to benefit their client's side. And so you may particularly get this from another side. If they disagree with the bio-parent's attorney, they may ask you questions that really distort reality. So I would encourage you not to try not to get flustered, and when in doubt, clarify what you mean. So when in doubt, don't let them shove you into a corner that requires you to misrepresent the truth. Just say, I'm sorry, that's not a fair question. That's a false dichotomy, or whatever is going on there, to say, I'm sorry, it's just not that simple, right? Or whatever. I encourage you to remember the reasons that brought you to this program in the first place, the belief that you have in the bio parents that they can improve, all that kind of stuff, and don't let an attorney corner you into saying something that you don't really mean or that you don't believe is true. And a big part of that is just trying not to get flustered, staying calm and pleasant, being confident about what you know, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of subtlety and nuance to the court process where the way that you come across as a person, your likability on the stand, your credibility on the stand, those things have a pretty significant intangible effect, I think, on the weight of your testimony, the reliability of your testimony. So the more calm and pleasant that you can be, the more likely you are to be able to represent yourself the way that you want to. All right, so that's the last slide. Thank you so much for watching all of the training. That was a lot of content. So if you have any questions, if you need any clarity, if you have suggestions about how this training could be improved, I encourage you, please reach out to me. Please let me know. We want to make this training as helpful as it can be. We want to address everything we need to address, do everything we can to set you up to win, because we could not do this program without you. So thank you again. Once you've finished all of this, please let me know, or your supervisor, depending on where we are at that point. But make sure you let somebody know that you've finished everything and that you're assuming you're ready to move forward. Let us know you're ready for the next step, and we would love to accelerate that process to get you partnered up with a bio parent and get engaged with this life-changing work. So thank you again. Appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.